Hey there, it's Walt. I want to share with you today what I think is the single most important ingredient for all success, whether business success or book writing success or relational success or just life success. The single most important key. And it has to do with sheep. Seriously. One of my very favorite people on the planet, he's gone now, Cliff Young. He was 61 years old and he grew potatoes and took care of sheep. He was a sheep farmer. And he had an interest in ultra distance running, which is why I was somewhat attracted to this story of Cliff. So at age 61, Cliff decided that he wanted to run the Sydney to Melbourne, Australia ultra marathon, one of the granddaddies of all ultra marathons, 544 miles. Now, here's the thing. Cliff had never run an ultra marathon before. He'd done a little bit of running and racing, but he'd never done a big race before. And he showed up to register for the Sydney to Melbourne Ultra Marathon, and the race officials weren't very keen on letting him register because he was in overalls and gumboots, Wellingtons, and he had no experience, and they kind of like gave him a little bit of a hard time about registering. And he said, no, you don't understand. I grow potatoes and chase sheep, so I'm good to go. And so the race officials finally relented, and Cliff registered for the ultra marathon, and off he went. And 6 days later, Cliff crossed the finish line, breaking the course record hours and hours ahead of his closest competitors, who were some of the greatest ultra marathoners on the planet. And in interviews afterwards with Cliff, the media sat him down and said, well, Cliff, we don't understand, in ultra marathons, a lot of people, they stop and they rest and they actually eat, and, many times they nap, they sleep in order to recover. And Cliff hadn't done any of that. And if you actually Google Cliff Young, you'll see what's known in the racing world as the Cliff Young shuffle. He's just shuffling along and he's shuffling along. And Cliff said, well, in response to the question, well, why didn't you stop and rest? Cliff said, well, I didn't know that I was supposed to. Cliff just kept on going. He kept on going hour after hour, day after day, and he crossed the finish line, smashing the course record because he kept going, because he stayed consistent. And consistency is the number one ingredient of success. I don't know how to run an ultra marathon. I've run a bunch of them. I know how to put one step in front of another. I can't tell you how to get through 50 or 100 miles other than to say, take a step. I climb big mountains. I don't know how to tell you how to get to one of the highest mountains on the planet, other than to take one step after another step, to stay in it. I don't know how to tell you to finish a book other than to show up every single day and write a page or a paragraph. Consistency is so key. Over and over and over again in our work, we see people who want to start a business, and they'll start in and they'll stop. They'll see a shiny toy, a shiny object, or a different way of doing it, and they'll stop and they'll think, and maybe they'll restart again. They do it with their athletic performance, with running, with book writing, with business building. They'll start and they'll stop. They'll start and they'll stop. And it's a little bit, in my mind, like, thinking about starting a house. You start building a house and you have a set of plans, and you go along, and then you kind of get bored with it, and you don't see the progress sufficiently, and you stop. And then, maybe a couple months later, you'll get another set of plans, a different set of plans, and you'll start again. I mean, what would you end up with? You'd end up with this. If you ended up with anything, you'd end up with something that looked completely unconsidered, dilapidated, if you will, because there was no consistency, there was no follow through. And consistency isn't sexy. It doesn't feel good. You don't see progress every single day. In fact, most days you don't see any progress at all, and it can be frustrating and demoralizing. And over the course of time, though, you create something magnificent. Cathedrals are built one stone at a time, one brick at a time. And in any moment in time, it might just look like a stack of stone. And so that's our call. If we want to build things that are extraordinary in our lives, if we want to make an impact, if we want to create a legacy, if we really want to touch a lot of lives in the world, we are called to show up every single day and do the work, whether we feel like it or not, and to stay consistent, just like Cliff Young, shuffling along day in and day out. It's not sexy, but it works. Make it a great rest of the day, great rest of the week. Talk soon.